like I say, a lot of you around about the 23rd are going to be looking into the skies, and you have to understand that the Large Hadron Collider, its power supply will be diverted back into heating homes, because that's the only way they're going to pay for the nuclear power station that actually powers it up. And so they have to finish their experiments by the end of September, early October, pretty much latest, I guess, because that's when, like I say, the power station has to change its power over to public consumption to pay for itself. And that particle accelerator is not going to be able to get geologically, because of the changes. It's going to struggle through the coming months, as we all are, and we all need to address that a little bit, and maybe quite a big bit. And you have to understand that when we think of it, they're going to be from now, really, it's all beefed up. They've re-beefed the machine up with super powered magnets. So the whole thing, everything they've been doing is the same, but just on a much bigger scale. And you have to understand that it doesn't take that long before the particles are spinning at 99.999% of the speed of light. And so you can understand that the collisions are already breaking the rules of of Einstein's rules of relativity, space-time and relativity, by literally spinning off. When they collide, these things almost double the speed of light. You can understand that the collision speeds are actually occurring at that tremendous speed now, and breaking all the rules and causing all sorts of kind of effects, and I would say damage to the space-time continuum, which is kind of like, you imagine if time isn't linear. Imagine if it is just a unified field, and all the time and all the place could also be in all the same place. So you can literally open one space up to another, dimensional tears. And when you're accelerating these, you understand that you can't lose power. You can transform energy, but you can't just pull out energy out of nowhere. You have to, you obviously have to open up that energy equation to be able to access energy and change your perception of energy, and start looking into the deeper space that we sometimes see as the void, and accessing the potential of that. But when you reach 99.99% of the speed of light with these particles, and you keep pushing more energy into it, into the system thereafter, obviously it's never going to go higher in its rotation speed than 99.999% of the speed of light. But when you pour more energy in, they start getting bigger and bigger. Well, the particles start behaving as if they've got massive atomic mass. They become heavier, much heavier, and the more energy you put in, the thousands and thousands and thousands of times heavier and heavier and heavier those particles, until they're like massive boulders flying around in this particle accelerator that are going to be having a collision speed at twice that of the speed of, or almost twice that of the speed of light. You're talking about and the type of bang that you're going to create in that. I mean, they're literally trying to create the biggest bang ever created in the universe to perform their experiment. Now, that's a bomb. That's a bomb in anyone's book, isn't it? A massive bomb. A detonation at a key point. And this is what happened on Mars. And I said I wouldn't go into it in this video, but I am going to go into it a little bit. I'm going to tell you the vision I saw, because there was a subtle reason why I mentioned Paloma's faith. Do you want the truth or something beautiful there? Well, I'll read you this little poem. Many know of the tale of the small piece of baguette that fell down a vent in CERN's Large Hadron Collider and shorted out a vital circuit board that shut down one of the main electromagnets, that in the realm of car mechanics might be termed as throwing a rod out the side of the engine. Not good, basically. Quite bad, in actual fact. We know about the baguette, but what do we know about its precision delivery? Well, as I'm understanding it, Paloma was a dove. Well, for her entire 7.77 seconds on this earth, she was actually a pigeon. But make no mistake, where she comes from, she was a dove. Her arrival on Earth was sparked by a predatory ambush of another pigeon on what could be described as a regular pigeon that just so happens to be carrying in her beak an also precious payload that to the unsuspecting and perhaps suspecting eye she was nothing more than a damp piece of baguette. No sooner had the pigeon seen the oncoming attacker, Paloma had immediately stepped in and completely taken over. She took one mighty flap of those giant wings, vastly increasing her airspeed, then immediately rolled upside down on her back, closing her wings in tight to her most aerodynamic form, all whilst falling ever backwards. Paloma had initiated a high-speed vertical dive. The predatory pigeon, used to far more tactical manoeuvring, had set in rapid pursuit, following its quarry that moved like a trajectory ever downwards towards some odd-looking vent-like thing, protruding from some equally odd, unearthly structure. Faster and faster Paloma had sped, leaving almost no distance left to pull out of her vertical descent, with the other bird hard on her tail, ever and ever closing in. And then what neither pigeon would have considered a rational manoeuvre, Paloma just released her quarry, that tiny piece of damp baguette that had been held so staunchly in her beak. The pursuing pigeon immediately followed the bounty ever downwards to what was fast approaching absolute terminal velocity, its beak nearly ready to close down, but it too, at the very last moment, had to break off its pursuit and watched its prize disappear down that vent. It might have returned to collect its bounty if it had not been so utterly terrified by the immediate violent crack that echoed up through the snow-capped mountain ranges towering above Geneva, and then equally mortified by the bright, blazing flash that followed directly after, the tiny piece of bread, damp from the saliva in the bird's mouth, as it disappeared down the vent, had landed directly on a tiny circuit board somewhere below that bridged two connections that caused a massive shortcut right at the worst possible time in a process neither pigeon understood. Two pigeons were witnessed flying in completely opposite directions above a smoking vent, above a particle collider far below, whilst Paloma had returned from whence she came. Her mission, to slow down the doomsday machine by just 3 months, as by her calculations that's all the time it would take to give humanity that little extra time to decide its fate. And then I'll just say, I had this vision. I had this vision. It was like an ayahuasca vision. And I'd gone up, and I'd gone up with a load of sort of merchandise to sell at Reading Rock Festival. And I'd been caught by the security and kicked out. And I was feeling really sort of like really low. And then I got a text saying that there was a space in a ceremony with some friends of mine in North London. And so I thought, well, maybe that's timing. So I decided to go up there and do the ceremony. And they took us to a clearing out in the woods, and we sat on this log, and we were just looking up into the skies, and it was sunset. And the shaman did this most beautiful ceremony. It was one of the most beautiful ceremonies. And I went through this whole process, and I did get a crazy message. It said, "Here marks." I was shot out from where I was sitting out into space. It was very similar to my Nibiru vision actually, but I was shot out into space, and I could see the planet. And then the sun came over the top of the planet, and it was bright sunlight. And it said, "Here marks the end of an age. Here marks the beginning of an age. Great knowledge and great wisdom comes with great responsibility." So it was a very exciting time, and and then I saw all these scientists staring up at these clocks on this wall, and they were all like 1 second, like the big hand was the minute, the second hand, all the other hands were at 12 o'clock, and then the second hand, as in seconds, was like 1 second away from midnight. And it suddenly went midnight, it suddenly clicked, and I just looked at all these scientists, and they were all just staring up at this clock, just waiting for this ominous sort of faces, all of them just their eyes glued to this clock. And Paloma Faith appeared of all the people in all the world in his visions, right in front of me, looking unbelievably gorgeous. And she was staring up, and she looked at them, she looked at me, and she started laughing. And she started laughing so much that she couldn't stand up, and she fell over laughing, and she was kind of rolling around on the floor in front of me in absolute hysterics that she literally couldn't stand up. She was laughing so much. And I've had that experience a few times in my life where I've laughed so much I literally couldn't stand up. So that's what I'm putting out for you guys there, because that's what came in for me, was just, it's our vibration that decides whether they're going to be allowed to destroy this world and bail out. And of course, they think they're bailing out, going to somewhere else, and of course they're not. This would kill them. This would kill virtually everyone on this planet. That's so much more disastrous than anything Nibiru can do. Especially in this passage where it doesn't even hit Earth, it just flies by. But nonetheless, of course, we're close to the borders, and nonetheless, it has massive, kind of like a psychic or massive effects on our psychic and astral links to our higher fifth dimensional selves, fifth and sixth dimensional kind of states. So this is where the biggest disruption is going to occur, and this is why they're so terrified, because they feel that they're going to lose control of humanity through this, because it's going to disrupt the whole thing, and it takes an enormous amount of time to refine and remake those links. Because once you've had a clear head and you know what a clear head is, it's very easy to see and understand psychic invasion. But if you're born into a psychic invasion, where all you know is ego interference, it's very difficult to know what that's like to have a very clear head thereafter, if you've never known it. And so, after this period, we're all going to have very clear heads as to who we are. We're not going to have that much disturbance. We're all going to be scratching our heads, kind of wondering what's going on, and this is going to be the biggest part of the change. And so we are, we're still going to have time after September the 23rd if they don't manage to detonate their device. But and like I say, only the vibration of this Earth will decide, because the gods don't want to be the ones that destroy Earth, and take us down. They don't want to be carrying that. And they didn't have to do that on Mars. Mars destroyed itself before Nibiru flew by, even though Nibiru impacted Mars and created several things. Number one, it pushed Mars off further away from the sun. Number two, the water had already drained off via the dimensional link between Earth and Mars through what we call Valles Marianis, up through what is on Earth called the Emperor Hawaiian seamount chain, which is, if you look above the Emperor Hawaiian seamount chain to that what looks like a curtain shape, and you can see on the left or on the west, I guess, that kind of like that mantle that on the Pacific basin that comes down underneath, I suppose from the Kamchatka Peninsula below Russia down under Japan and down towards the Philippines, and if you go east, you can see it's kind of like Alaska and British Columbia heading down to sort of America there. And that, does it not look like an absolute beautiful perfect split? It's like, I don't know how best to describe that really. It's like it looks like a curtain. I call it the true Iron Curtain, the true dividing membrane between those who arrived, our maritime law, and the common law, the land that we've been fighting for over the last century or so, millennium or so, should I say, if not longer. And I know that to be true. When I started doing this and I got this message, it was just like, and I was so excited when I'd broken through, if you like, and I started getting these wonderful messages, and I was being told I was going to write a book, and it was all so exciting, and then it was just like, and we're being invaded by Martians. No. You can imagine it was gutting. It was the most saddest thing. And but as the more I researched it, the most likeliest planet there was beyond Earth that could have ever had life. Of course, it's obviously Mars. We know that. We know that because of the Noachian periods where we know we've had water. Ironically, and it's Lovelock's work there that helped me discover the fact there was water on Mars, or the history of that, or more understanding the geological process of how you could say, for example, the moon makes the sea salty. And I know I'm ranting here, but it's so important that I'm going to get you this information out, because it's going to be one of my last main videos. But you can understand how carbon dioxide mixes with the water, with the sea, because of the waves. The moon cools the waves, and this takes in carbon dioxide. And obviously that's carbonated water, and the carbonated water can separate the calcium from the bedrock with two molecules of carbonated water or carbonic acid. Each has 3 atoms of oxygen. And so that makes a combined 6 atoms of oxygen, which can literally oxidize calcium from bedrock, producing calcium bicarbonate, but also turning solid bedrock into clays, if you like, literally. And obviously the smallest particles in that, as in the smallest atoms that break free from that, are going to be carbons, and they're going to be the silicates, aren't they, and the hydrogens and that sort of stuff. And obviously the carbon atoms can go down and get very compressed down a very dense kind of under the pressure of an ocean acting down. And if there's enough pressure, as there is on Earth, you can get the formation of diamonds, just pure carbon being pushed together. But beyond that, you get another sort of form of crystalline process occurring, where you get the oxygen fusing with then what is the silicates, the silicon atoms, and of course that's producing quartz, basic quartz, fundamental pure quartz. But if you get a mixture of other elements going into there, you can get all sorts of different types of crystals that are made of this same sort of like silicate, sort of like crystalline, process, with the heat from the sort of like under the crust and the pressure of the oceans acting down on the top. And if there's plutons in there, uranium, thorium, cesium, all things like that, if there's plutons in there, you are going to start getting a radioactive crystal that we would call zircon. And of course zircon effectively makes the oldest clock in the world, where we have carbon dating, which is like 4 half cycles of 5,600 years. 5,500, 5,600 years, you get about 25,000 year full kind of carbon cycle that we call a clock. Well, have you just noticed that Earth has just jumped from 65 million years to nearly 4.6 billion years without barely a mention? It's just like the arrival of the biggest fault line of Earth up until 2001, before the Emperor Hawaiian Seamount chain arrived on our planet. The Valles Marianas was the largest, most spectacular fault line in our solar system, and suddenly this new fault line arrives and barely anyone's even noticed. And then the age of Earth just happens to just jump forward to the age of Mars. That's like, it's going to take 60 million years just to fill the kind of like this new, I can't even begin to sort of put a number on how many sort of like 4 point whatever it is billion years we've now got to add to the sort of like to the 65 million years that we previously supposed the age of Earth. The whole thing, our whole storyline has just been ripped apart in front of us, and no one's, have you heard anyone shouting it out? The way they explain the sort of like the way the magma pours out of Hawaii. Now, Hawaii is the biggest mountain, the biggest obviously volcano, but the biggest mountain in the world. It's you could fit what would it, Everest into Hawaii hundreds of times, I think. It's massive. It's far bigger, but of course it goes deep under the oceans. And so why does they call the mental plume theory an explanation to try and explain why the magma comes out of Hawaii thinner than anywhere else, why it's like water. And of course the real logic is because it's brand new. The crust is so thin there. This thing all occurred really quite relatively recently in terms of geological times. This is all very, very new. And then the magma split, causing the 2 largest earthquakes either side of it, one on the Kamchatka Peninsula in the northern hemisphere, the second largest volcano in the world, and then obviously Hawaii, the biggest. But the fact that this fault line also joins these two volcanoes, and then the kind of magma obviously split out from there after the water kind of exited via Mars, via a dimensional tear. It caused this massive split. Magma came out, it went in all directions, butted up, created what we call the Pacific Basin. You can see the wave of it, how it busted through here between the Antarctica and Antarctica and obviously South America here, and where the Sandwich Islands form here. The whole thing is really quite simple to see. The whole picture, even the sort of like, even the Nibiru's tail, full of sort of like the boulders and the red dust as from when it impacted and did the damage to Mars. But like I say, it wasn't that destroyed life on Mars. It was the bailing out. And Nibiru's not going to hit Earth. It's not about that this time. Earth has had to learn a really valuable lesson. Humanity has had to learn a really valuable lesson. It has been forced into a state of non-stop perpetual war for thousands of years, just fighting each other, totally turned on our brethren all the time, forced against each other. We have had to learn the terrible woes of war, and that's why this is such a beautiful transition, because we're coming out of that now. And I don't know how the outcome is, but that those that arrived with the Great Flood from Mars will have to. They have decisions to make as well, whether they choose to oppose us or whether they choose to work with us and become brethren to us. We need to work together now, and we're going to become. We're simply neck and neck. That's what's happened. Humanity is neck and neck now, and in various ways, because we were more advanced in our connection with the gods, I'm understanding previously, but we weren't so scientifically advanced as we are today. So we had a different type of science, if you like, before they arrived, and so now we have another type of science, much more akin to the science that perhaps our gods have used, but nonetheless we were already tapped into a very, very super science before they arrived. But now our science is a much more, it covers a broader area, but nonetheless we're going to want to go back to that old science that we also had before. We're going to want the whole spectrum of the majestic science available to us, and that is all opening up for us now. And we've got to trust in that, and we've got to go with that. But we're going to need to come together and deal with this issue, and there's not many people who are going to see it coming in. There's not many people who are going to understand what's going on. And so if you're getting this message now, and if you're hearing me now, it's because you're meant to be hearing it now. And you're going to be making a decision, and the future of this world is going to sit on the decisions that you make, because picture yourself and all that can occur in a whole new world beginning, say from now. Really, the world is always beginning anew in every new moment, but imagine a whole new world beginning from now, and it's starting right from you. And it's a little line, and it's one single line going off, and it might multiply into many things and become many new things. But it comes down to a decision in an individual right now, and that individual, believe it or not, is you. And it's really his human choice that drives this, whether you can rise to this challenge and do something. And I've tried to show you in my life, through my life, I've been, my guide comes to me when it shows me as actually, ironically, as a daffodil. I know that sounds a bit bony, doesn't it? But as a daffodil, and the daffodil it has a beautiful view of a wonderful world. It doesn't need to go anywhere or do anything. It's very whole and complete in itself. And it loves radiant sunshine. It loves being around radiant sunshine. But if when it's growing, you can tarmac a road, and it will push through a tarmac by constantly pushing. And I felt as if I've had this energy working through me, where I've had very little power in this realm, as in money. But I've always constantly been out there, always doing it, always pushing it, always doing the best I can with the very least amount. I've tried to be a lean, mean, sort of like machine doing what I've had to do, but I've not needed money. That's kind of why I fell out with my brother when he said he'd give me 100 grand. He has helped me out. My brother really has helped me out, but it wasn't to the tune of anything like that. You know, he helped me out with it was probably about like 10, 15 grand during the process of writing Laughing Gas over a period of time. But that wasn't like 100 grand paid out over a long period of time. And the reason it stood out for me was because I've struggled with so many friends with little money in the past, and I've been there with them. And the thought of actually having lots of money, you know, I've never wanted that. Even though now I know we're going to need that. We're going to need that money coming in, because unless we bring that in, I can't perform a miracle here. That's just not going to come for you. You have to be your miracle, because if you're too cool for this, I get that, you know, I get that. You must think, I don't want to talk about something like this, you know, I'm damaging climate change if I start talking about this, or it's not very cool and people are going to laugh at me. Get over it. Get over it. You know, I have to get over that. I'm not cool. My country has dumped thousands and thousands and thousands of times more radioactive waste on Iraq, in the name of a crime that, you know, in the form of depleted uranium, in the name of a crime that I know they did not do. So I had to devote my life to try and stand up against that. Oh, I'm guilty of that crime in my heart. I feel I'm just complicit. If I didn't just sit by and do nothing. So I devote my life to that, because what else can I do? Just try and go and get a job and pretend everything's happy go lucky, and just bury my head in the sand and pretend that's not happened? I have to. I'm absolutely charged, as I cannot leave this plane if I do not give my everything to sort of like to changing that. Then I am of that. Then I am of that same level. Surely I know that. That might hurt you if you haven't done that much, and I'm sure you have done all that you've done. But for me, you know, we all do as much as we can do, don't we? In whatever field we're doing, however we see it. I'm going to leave you with this poem, if I haven't helped you find that all-essential tear, by a lovely chap called Alyosha. I remember I met him in Mongolia. I went up to see the solar eclipse in Mongolia in 1998, and it was obviously just after the Hong Kong handover. And the reason I kind of went up there, it was kind of a long mission. I used to chase around and follow eclipses for many years. And there was an eclipse happening in North Mongolia, just below the Siberian border. And I can remember getting into Mongolia at that time was very, very difficult. And to get the visas and everything else like that, there was all sorts of crazy skullduggery in China that we had to sort of do in Beijing at the time to get up into Mongolia. And of course you had to get up there because there was Comet Halley-Bopp flying by at that time, and you could only see it from the northern hemisphere. So we had to get right up to the other side of the sort of like, you know, right up to the more of the north of the globe to sort of like see it. So we had to kind of like had a bit of an epic adventure, and I did it on so little money, it was ridiculous. And of course back then they were kind of rare things, weren't they? Comets, and so you had Comet Halley-Bopp and and Halley's Comet and stuff like that. And then suddenly they turn up like the buses since 2011, every 198 days. And of course I remember when they were a rare thing, and suddenly NASA's Comet Elenin, Comet Ison, Comet this, Comet that, asteroid this, super close flyby that. We saw loads, and to me, I was smelling a rat already, thinking, hang on, there's something not right here. These used to be rare things, and suddenly they're all turning up. And of course, when I started finding the 198, 200 day interval, I was like, oh my God. Anyway, on the way down on the way back in Mongolia, I jumped on this train heading out, and I met this American guy who to me was missing one front tooth. And I very calmly asked him, I said, how did you lose your front tooth? And he said, I never lost it. And I was like, oh, you know, I had to profoundly apologise, or profusely apologise. And so I'd like to read you the poem he recited to me about an eclipse. His name's Alyosha, and I'd love to invite him out here to the little to the conference we're going to do out here on the 11th. So if you see him, you'll recognise him. He's the guy who's not missing one front tooth. His name's Alyosha. I read you this lovely poem. He wrote it to me. He read it to me, and I was in tears at the end of it. And I really want to I really want to leave you with this, on a high note, and just to remembering that you are so beautiful. You're more beautiful than you ever realise. All that noise that sometimes goes through your head, that plagues you with so much kind of doubt and all the rest of it. Just remember, you're not that noise. You know, you are what you would do in this world, not what you think, what you do, what comes out of you. You know, the things that you speak and the things that you do is what you truly are. Do not ever think that you're the noise in your head. You're simply not. You know, you recycle so much of the nonsense that goes through you, and you produce works of art. Your lives are works of art in the eyes of the gods. I can promise you, we're all so beautiful in the eyes of the gods. You know, for the efforts that we make with all the subversion that is going on the psychic levels. Okay, so the tide was stirring up the sea, which lapped against the sand. The sand made up a sunny beach, which lapped against the land. The land rose up to the mountain peaks, which lapped against the sky, and the sky contained the moon, whose laps elliptic caused the tides. I whispered to my girlfriend on the mountain by the sea, "Hey, can you keep a secret? The man in the moon is me. I like to shine upon you as I cycle round your world, for I can tell from far away you're such a far-out girl. I drive the sea and wind to move the rivers and the sand, to sculpt a ring of canyons, which I place upon your hand. I orbit round you, baby, you're my world, my number one. Whom could you cherish more?" My sweetheart answered, "The sun." I bellowed, "That philanderer! You think that he's so great? You think that you're his only girl? He's got another 8. Oh, baby, I'm so faithful, please consent to be my wife. For what can I provide that he cannot?" She answered, "Life." He offers food and light to the plants for which I'm bound. He gives me thermal power, heating up my fertile ground, enabling my children to proliferate and spread. I love you, you big lunatic, but without him, I'm dead. The answer left me speechless, mad with envy and chagrin. I spend my life orbiting her, and she's in love with him. I said I'll win you over, yes I must, without a doubt. I'll show you who has power. I will block your boyfriend out. Her voice was full of fear. "Oh no, don't make him go away. My children need him to survive. They need the light of day. Oh, please don't do what you propose," I heard her stricken cry. "I need the sun, for as I said, without him I will die." I felt a pang of pity, but it quickly turned to glee. If I can pull this off, I thought, she'll be impressed with me. Then she'll know who holds the reins of power up above. And then with me it's plain to see, she'll madly fall in love. I sat right down to work upon my plans to rule the sky. I worked out the equations of the paths that we three fly. I figured out a way to shift the track of my ellipse and put my scheme in action, and I created an eclipse. I marvelled at the beauty of the shadow on the land. I revelled in the glory that I had done what I had planned. And turning to my sweetheart, sure that now she'd think me great, I saw her staring full of awe, but also full of hate. I realised at once that this was not the way to win her love, so I moved, restoring full the day. She smiled and it warmed me as the sun was warming her, and I knew that I was wrong to try and keep light from the earth. Now this happened centuries ago, and every year since then, for just a couple of minutes, I've blocked the sun again. A short reminder for the earth for whom my love still burns, to show her that I accept it's around the sun she turns. The tide, it still stirs up the sea, which laps against the sand, and the sand still makes a sunny beach, which laps against the land. The land still rises to the peaks, which lap against the sky, and lapping between sun and earth, eternally am I. The whole thing, everything they've been doing it's the same, but just on a much bigger scale. And you have to understand that it doesn't take that long before the particles are spinning at 99.999% of the speed of light. And so you can understand that the collisions are already breaking the rules of sort of like of Einstein's rules of relativity, space-time and relativity, by literally spinning off. When they collide, these things almost double the speed of light. You can understand that the collision speeds are actually occurring at that tremendous speed now, and breaking all the rules and causing all sorts of kind of effects, and I would say damage to the space-time continuum, which is kind of like you imagine if time isn't linear. Imagine if it is just a unified field, and all the time and all the place could also be in all the same place. So you can literally open one space up to another, dimensional tears. And when you're accelerating these, you understand that you can't lose power. You can't shut down one of the main electromagnets that in the realm of car mechanics might be termed as throwing a rod out the side of the engine. Not good, basically. Quite bad, in actual fact. We know about the baguette, but what do we know about its precision delivery? Well, as I'm understanding it, Paloma was a dove. Well, for her entire 7.77 seconds on this earth, she was actually a pigeon. But make no mistake, where she comes from, she was a dove. Her arrival on Earth was sparked by a predatory ambush of another pigeon on what could be described as a regular pigeon that just so happens to be carrying in her beak an also precious payload that to the unsuspecting and perhaps suspecting eye she was nothing more than a damp piece of baguette. No sooner had the pigeon seen the oncoming attacker, Paloma had immediately stepped in and completely taken over. She took one mighty flap of those giant wings, vastly increasing her airspeed, then immediately rolled upside down on her back, closing her wings in tight to her most aerodynamic form. Heavier and heavier and heavier those particles until they're like massive boulders flying around in this particle accelerator that are going to be having a collision speed at twice that of the speed of, or almost twice that of the speed of light. You're talking about the type of bang that you're going to create in that. I mean, they're literally trying to create the biggest bang ever created in the universe to perform their experiment. Now that's a bomb. That's a bomb in anyone's book, isn't it? A massive bomb. A detonation at a key point. And this is what happened on Mars. And I said I wouldn't go into it in this video, but I am going to go into it a little bit. I'm going to tell you the vision I saw, because there was a subtle reason why I mentioned Paloma's faith. Do you want the truth or something beautiful there? Well, I'll read you this. I'll read you this little poem. Many know of the tale of the small piece of baguette that fell down a vent in CERN's Large Hadron Collider and shorted out a vital circuit board. You can transform energy, but you can't just pull out energy out of nowhere. You have to you obviously have to open up that energy equation to be able to access energy and change your perception of energy, and start looking into the deeper space that we sometimes see as the void, and accessing the potential of that. But when you reach 99.99% of the speed of light with these particles, and you keep pushing more energy into it, into the system thereafter, obviously it's never going to go higher in its rotation speed than 99.999% of the speed of light. But when you pour more energy in, they start getting bigger and bigger. Well, the particles start behaving as if they've got massive atomic mass. They become heavier, much heavier, and the more energy you put in, the thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Like I say, a lot of you around about the 23rd are going to be looking into the skies, and you have to understand that the Large Hadron Collider, its power supply will be diverted back into heating homes, because that's the only way they're going to pay for the nuclear power station that actually powers it up. And so they have to finish their experiments by the end of September, early October, pretty much latest, I guess, because that's when, like I say, the power station has to change its power over to sort of like public consumption to pay for itself, and that particle accelerator is not going to be able to get geologically, because of the changes. It's going to struggle through the coming months, as we all are, and we all need to address that a little bit, and maybe quite a big bit. And you have to understand that when we think of it, they're going to be from now, really, it's all beefed up. They've re-beefed the machine up with super powered magnets.